preschoolers. We just wrapped up our polar habitats unit, so I have a story for you about the Arctic today. All right, so last time we talked about Antarctica. That's the South Pole. The North Pole is the Arctic, and there's a lot of ocean surrounded by land. And we're going to talk about an animal that lives up in the Arctic. So, do you know what this animal is? It's the polar bear. So, meet the mother polar bear and her two polar bear cubs. Oops, he's upside down. Okay, and this book is called Polar Star. There we go. Deep beneath the frozen Arctic snow, Polar Star stirred in the cozy den she had built to protect herself from the winter cold. Her fur was thicker than it had ever been, and she was fat, ready to feed her cubs when they were born. She would not eat again until the spring. Polar Star gave birth to Snowball and Snowflake. Oh, look at them. They were small as kittens, blind and helpless. They nuzzled their way through their mother's fur until they reached her milk and fed hungrily. Then they slept. For 3 months, Polar Star fed and nursed her cubs, and soon they grew as big as puppies. Up above, the days were growing lighter and the winds were less harsh. The time had come to leave the den. Polar Star broke through the walls and gazed at the sparkling white world before her. She hauled herself out into the freezing air and threw herself into the snow, rolling over and over, a joyful jumble of fur and legs. And look, Snowball and Snowflake watched spellbound from the den, blinking furiously. In the bright sunlight and squealing, they watched and waited. Then they stumbled outside, step by slippery step, following their mother. It's the first time they'd seen snow. As the days passed, they quickly became bundles of trouble. As they clambered on top of Polar Star and wrestled with each other. Their favorite game was to climb a steep slope and toboggan down, slipping and sliding on their tummies. Do you remember an Antarctic animal that likes to do that? The penguin. He toboggans down the hill on his tummy too. But now it was time for Polar Star to find food for herself. She set out, venturing over land and onto the treacherous sea ice. She wove her way across the frozen wilderness, keeping her cubs close by and stopping only to feed them and to sleep. Soon they were far from land. Polar Star left her cubs to play and ambled to the edge of the ice. Snowball and Snowflake watched as their mother gave a great shudder of joy and plunged beneath the waves. Moments later, she heaved herself out, shook herself dry, and sniffed her way across the ice in search of food. At last, she stopped by a large hole, sat and waited. Her wait was rewarded when the head of a seal popped up through the hole. She acted quickly. One cuff of her giant paw sent the seal crashing against the ice, and Polar Star had her first meal in 5 months. That's a long time between meals. While Snowball watched his mother, Snowflake wandered over to the water's edge, unaware that danger was closing in fast. A huge male polar bear was striding toward her. He was hungry and would think nothing of snatching a cub for food. Oh no, Snowflake's in danger. Snowball saw the big male bear and ran squealing to his mother. Polar Star turned in alarm. She saw the male bear and rose up on her hind legs, growling a terrible growl. The male bear hesitated for a second, then grabbed at Snowflake. Polar Star charged, but the male bear reared up onto his hind legs and struck her again. Polar Star fell backward. Then she hurled herself at the male bear again, pummeling him with her paws and roaring with fury. She's a good mom protecting her cubs. At last, the male bear backed away, shaken by her fearlessness, and began to lick his wounds. Polar Star didn't waste any time. She gathered the terrified cubs to her and raced away across the ice. They walked for miles. At last, darkness swept around them, and Polar Star scoured the landscape for shelter. She tunneled into a mound of drifted snow and built a den. There, Snowball and Snowflake snuggled up tight in the folds of her enormous body and felt safe again. The world outside was an exciting place, but it was also full of danger. Polar Star would be there to protect her cubs until they were old enough and wise enough to look after themselves. What a good mom. She could keep Snowball and Snowflake safe. Let's see. Here's some polar bear facts. I'll read you a couple. Did you know that polar bears are excellent swimmers and can spend hours in the icy waters of the Arctic Ocean? They're also the largest meat-eating land mammals. They mostly eat seals, grabbing them when they come up for air at their breathing holes in the ice. And polar bears might even kill small whales and walruses. They're pretty powerful. So in November and December, the female bears dig dens in the snow and they disappear inside until March or April. So that's 4 or 5 months. During that time, they give birth to 1, 2, or sometimes 3 tiny cubs. The cubs first just feed on their mother's milk, and then when they're about 3 months old, they leave the den with their mother, and they stay with her, and she gets food for them until they are just over 2 years old. And you know the polar bear's enemy? Well, we saw other polar bears, but guess what? The only enemy that adult polar bears have is people, so we can help keep polar bears safe. All right, so that is our story about the Arctic animal. I'm glad you've been able to join us for some stories about polar habitats.